Breaking up with Lauren was one of the hardest things I've ever had to do. We had been together for 6 years, building strong memories, and I cared about her deeply. I was very close to proposing at one point, but things just weren't working out. We met at our favorite cafe, the aroma of coffee beans mingling with the tension in the air. As I told her we needed a break, her eyes filled with tears. She looked at me, her expression a mix of disbelief and heartbreak. "Why?" she whispered, her voice barely audible amid the cafe's bustling ambience. I struggled to find the right words to explain that I needed space, that we both needed time to figure things out. But no explanation seemed good enough. Lauren stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor, and without a word, she stormed out, leaving me sitting there, feeling like the worst person in the world. The next day, I started noticing Lauren everywhere. At first, I thought it was just a coincidence. Maybe she was just trying to process things, just like me. But as the days went on, it became clear that she was following me. I would see her at places I frequented, always at a distance, always watching me. It was unnerving, to say the least. I tried to confront her, to ask her why she was following me, but she would always disappear before I could get close enough to talk to her. When I tried calling her, she answered but remained silent. Her breathing was heavy on the other end, causing a shudder to run through me. It was as if she was there, listening, but refusing to speak. One evening, a few days after the breakup, there was a knock at my door. I opened it to find Lauren standing there, her eyes red and swollen from crying. She looked like she hadn't slept in days. "Can we talk?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I hesitated, unsure of what to say. I still cared about Lauren, but I knew that talking would only make things harder for both of us. "I think it's best if we give each other some space," I said gently, trying to keep my voice steady. Lauren's face fell, and for a moment, I thought she might cry. But instead, she just nodded silently and turned to leave. As she walked away, I couldn't shake the feeling that I had made a mistake, that I should have let her in and listened to what she had to say. Alone in my apartment, the weight of my decision settled in. I questioned if I had been too hasty, too dismissive of her pain. The silence that followed her departure was deafening, filled with unspoken words and lingering regrets. Looking back, I realized Lauren's behavior had been strange long before our breakup. She'd disappear for hours, offering vague explanations. I would catch her staring at me when she thought I wasn't looking, her gaze intense and unwavering. There were times when she would laugh at odd moments, her laughter ringing hollow and unsettling. And then there were the nightmares. Lauren would wake up screaming in the middle of the night, her body drenched in sweat, but she could never remember what she had dreamt about. I attempted to push these signs aside, assuring myself everything was okay, yet a nagging feeling told me otherwise. That's why I initially considered a breakup. Well, then Lauren's behavior took a real disturbing turn. It started with the cryptic texts from odd numbers and messages left at my doorstep, each one more unnerving than the last. They were filled with ramblings about our past, our future, and how we were meant to be together forever, always bolding, forever. I tried to ignore them, to convince myself they were just the actions of a broken heart. But then, things started happening in my apartment. I would find my belongings rearranged, as if someone had been there while I was away. I would keep my computer camera on, hoping to catch whoever was responsible, but it never caught anything out of the ordinary. One night, I woke up to a feeling of dread, a sense that something was not right. I opened my eyes slowly, the room bathed in darkness, and there she was, Lauren, standing at the foot of my bed. Her presence was chilling, her eyes empty and hollow, staring right through me. I couldn't move, couldn't speak, paralyzed by the sheer terror of her appearance. Seconds passed like hours, the silence of the room broken only by the sound of my own frantic heartbeat, and then, with a flicker, she vanished into thin air, leaving me trembling and drenched in cold sweat. I sat up, my heart still racing, and reached for the light switch. But as soon as I got up to turn on the lights, a thought occurred to me. How could she have left the room without opening or closing the door? I had checked every corner, every hiding spot, but there was no sign of her. The room was empty, except for me, alone in the darkness with the lingering sense of her presence. Several days passed after the night I saw Lauren in my room. I tried to move on, but the fear and confusion lingered. I hadn't heard from her since that night, and a part of me was worried about her well-being. One evening, I decided to check on her. I still had a key to her apartment, so I drove over. As I approached her door, an overwhelming sense of dread washed over me. I unlocked the door and was immediately hit by a putrid smell. It was so strong that I had to cover my nose and mouth with my shirt. I hesitated but pushed forward, calling out her name. The apartment was dark, and as I moved deeper inside, the smell grew worse. I reached her bedroom and pushed the door open. The sight that greeted me was something out of a nightmare. Lauren's lifeless body was sprawled out on the floor, her clothes and skin stained with dried blood. She had been dead for days, maybe longer. The walls were covered with pictures of us, but in each one, her face was crossed out with thick red ink. The words "forever" were scrawled across the walls in what looked like blood. I stumbled back, the horror of the scene hitting me like a tidal wave. I fumbled for my phone, dialing 911 with shaking hands. As I waited for the police to arrive, I couldn't tear my eyes away from the gruesome scene. The police confirmed what I already knew. Lauren had been dead, but to my surprise, for at least 2 weeks. They found no signs of forced entry or struggle, ruling her death a suicide. But I knew the truth was far more complicated. In the days that followed, I couldn't shake the feeling that Lauren was still with me, watching me from the shadows. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her empty gaze, felt her cold presence. It struck me with chilling clarity. The night that Lauren had visited me in my room, the last night I thought I saw her alive, she had already been long dead. Breaking up with Lauren was supposed to be a way for both of us to find peace, but instead, it unleashed a nightmare that would haunt me for the rest of my life. Every night, as I lie to sleep, I wonder if she's still there, standing at the foot of my bed, waiting for the right moment to appear again. As the fall semester of my second year at California State University began, I found myself overwhelmed with immediate assignments and extensive readings. Amidst the hustle, I discovered solace in our campus's beautiful Japanese garden. Strolling through its winding paths, I admired the stunning array of plants, flowers, and trees. The ponds inhabited by koi fish and the serene waterfalls added to the already perfect ambience. The garden was usually quieter in the late evening, my favorite time to visit for some peaceful reading. One late evening, after a late session on financial management concepts, I headed to the garden as the sun was setting, giving me about an hour before it closed. I settled into my favorite spot beneath a Japanese maple, which provided just the amount of shade and a perfect view of the garden. There were a few groups of people, but most were likely having dinner at this time. Beside the bridge, a middle-aged man filming with his phone caught my attention. He aimed his sights in my direction and paused. It appeared he was pointing his device directly at me. Eventually, he continued down the path, but kept awkwardly looking back my way. The way he lingered and repeatedly gazed back gave me chills. I felt he was almost trying to make me feel uncomfortable. My anxiety grew as I realized the path he was on would eventually lead him to me. Torn between staying or leaving, I decided to stay since there were others around. A few minutes later, he started walking towards me, still holding his phone. He showed no hesitation in invading personal space, climbing the small grassy hill and sitting down uncomfortably close. I mean, out of the whole garden, why sit less than 10 feet from me? Trying to be polite, I guess, I made brief eye contact and smiled, but quickly started gathering my things. He asked if I was a student. I nodded, wished him a nice day, and began to leave. Out of nowhere, he mentioned he was a photography student, which I found hard to believe given his age and outdated phone for a camera. As I walked away, I felt a prickling sensation on the back of my neck, like his eyes were burning into me. When he asked to take my picture, I looked back briefly and replied he already had several, and hurried towards the exit gate. Just as I was leaving, I heard him mutter, "Because you're effing sexy." I reported him to a security guard, but since the garden was open to public, they couldn't check for his student ID. Maybe I was overreacting, but I've been in bad encounters before. As I walked to my car, I saw that man walking to his car, staring so intently at me. Unlocking and getting in my car, I sat parked, waiting and texting my boyfriend. The man slowly got into his car, adjusting his rearview mirror to keep me in sight as I was positioned behind him, then just continued to sit there. My nervousness grew as minutes passed. I decided to drive off quickly, hoping to lose him. But just as I turned onto a quieter street, I saw his headlights appear in my rear view as he rounded the corner. As I drove, I noticed his car was getting closer and closer. What on earth does this guy want? Why does he feel so driven to scare me? Desperate, I parked and called 911. While explaining the situation to the operator, who quickly answered, he slowly pulled up alongside my car, took more pictures of me, grinned, and sped off. His laugh, barely audible through my closed window, filled me with dread. I managed to grab his license plate number and reported the encounter, but never heard anything back. Hesitant to return to the Japanese garden, I eventually built up the courage. Luckily, the school year passed without any further freaky incidents, but the experience stayed with me, making each visit to the garden a cautious one, knowing at any time that man could return. In this story, we rewind to 1996 when I was a 17-year-old with a beat-up Chevy Cavalier as my pride and joy, right alongside my beloved original PlayStation. I had a tight-knit group of friends, and I was the only one with a license and a car. Once I started driving, We would lessen on the video game playing and instead cruise around our town and neighboring areas, always on the lookout for something interesting. One eerie late night in October, we were out driving and couldn't believe how impenetrable the fog was. Living on the Oregon coast, we were no strangers to foggy weather, but this night the fog was so dense it felt almost supernatural, making it the most intense fog I've ever witnessed. Even though staying inside would have been the safer choice that night, we decided to head to a nearby golf course. I parked the car and Jesse, Liam, Will, and I ventured out into the vast open fairways. It might seem like a peculiar way to have some fun, but for us, exploring places like that, especially in eerie conditions, was an adventure we couldn't resist. We created a competition and divided into two groups, Liam with Will and Jesse with me. Liam and I had watches, so we were team leaders. The challenge was to gather as many golf flags as we could and regroup at the car in 30 minutes. As we swiftly roamed through the foggy fairways, the shouts of Liam and Will grew fainter as we parted ways. The mist speckling our faces felt invigorating, providing a natural burst of energy as we continued. Several paces ahead, Jesse suddenly halted and fixed his gaze in one direction. When I caught up and asked what was going on, he paused before saying he thought he saw someone, then quickly took off. Immediately after, we heard muffled shouting, but couldn't discern the words. I thought maybe it was just the other guys, but Jesse wasn't convinced. Why would anyone else be out here? But I suppose these mysterious figures could be thinking the same thing about us. Jesse was clearly frightened, his head on a constant swivel as we finally reached our first flag at hole 3. Just as we removed the flag, a loud, terrifying scream from a woman pierced the air. Her voice sent a spike of fear straight through us. Starting to feel pretty unnerved now, we decided to just move in the opposite direction of that horrific ghostly wail and head back to the car. We both were not in the mood to play hero and investigate further. Things only got worse as we quickly found ourselves utterly lost. We had no sense of direction. Calling out for Liam and Will, we held onto our single flag, no longer caring about the competition. "Carter, look," Jesse suddenly said, pointing towards 3 dark, misty figures barely visible in the thick fog, no more than 20 feet away. I squinted, trying to get a better view, but the figures vanished when we heard more shouting behind us. Those voices, though, sounded like Liam and Will. We eventually regrouped, and they had collected about 5 flags. When we told them about seeing and hearing others out here, they were more excited and laughing about the flags they had gathered. Together again as a complete group, we made our way back to the car, though we only had a vague sense of the direction it was in. To our disbelief, after about 30 minutes of searching the foggy greens for our parking spot, we found the road we had come in on. But as we approached the parking spot, the car had vanished, leaving behind only dirty tire marks. Just then, looking ahead, we saw the hazy red taillights of my car disappearing into the mist as it drove away. We were all in shock, and it took a while to process what had happened. Stranded in the middle of nowhere without a phone or any means of communication, we began walking down the foggy county road. Luckily, a car eventually approached and gave us a ride back into town. Trying to explain what happened to my parents when I got home made me look foolish. Looking back at half the things I did at that age, I realized how dangerous and reckless they were. My car was never found. The figures we saw at the golf course and the screams that made our hair stand on end serve as a constant reminder that there are unforeseen dangers and threats out there. Fortunately, they didn't seem violent, but every time there's a foggy night, I'm reminded of that eerie experience.